All right. Hey, folks. So today's a little bit different. Join me for a trip down memory lane. I want to tell you some gym stories. I was motivated to do this because I saw a thread on Reddit where people were asking for crazy gym stories. And I wrote my reply and I got to thinking, I thought, you know what, this makes for quite a good video. I think some of the guys might like to hear about this. So I'm going to tell you a range of stories from my time in hardcore spit and sawdust gyms over the last 25 years. Some funny, some tragic, some dark humor, and just some which are quite interesting. So the first story is way back in 2000-ish. Myself and my brother, we started at this hardcore gym in town. It was a real tough gym, you know, spit and sawdust kind of gym. So this was a well-established hardcore gym, been around for 20 years. This gym was awesome. It had a boxing ring upstairs. On any given night, you had a range of powerlifters, bodybuilders, strong men, Olympic weightlifters, all under one roof. It was fantastic, very motivating, you know, for a guy like me as an 18-year-old just starting at the gym. Super motivational to see guys benching 4 plates, deadlifting 7 plates on any given night. Just amazing stuff, right? So great gym. Now, over the course of that year, the current owner was selling the gym. He was a local businessman, had a range of businesses, and he just so happened to be getting rid of this one. Now, the guy who put the bid in to get the gym actually turned out to be the current manager of the gym. So the guy who worked at the front desk. Now, for whatever reason, call it ego or whatever it was, the previous owner felt bad about that. Okay. He thought to himself, like, who are you to take my gym? You work for me, and you know, all that kind of stuff, kind of a whole bit ego thing. I don't know what it was. So the manager then became the owner. All good. Now, the manager had a real anti-steroid stance, which is to be admired, right? It was good. However, he was so anti-steroid, he banned everyone in the gym who not only he felt was selling steroids, but who he felt was taking steroids. Can you imagine that in a modern day setting? That'd be half the gym, you know, certainly the gym I go to. But back in the day, because bodybuilding was such a niche activity, it was about 12 guys, but still 12 regular members of the gym who were well-known personalities, all of a sudden overnight just gone from the gym. They went to the neighboring gym in town. Now, the story is most of them came back along with the previous owner one night and dumped a bunch of cement down the plumbing of the gym, causing just thousands of pounds worth of damage. There was no CCTV camera, so nothing could be done. But that was the first story. A pretty crazy story, pretty insane story of revenge. All right, next story is kind of tragic, but also a bit of dark humor as well. So this was at another hardcore gym in town. I was youngish at the time, about 25, 26, and I was training in the gym alongside my friend. And there was a rather large guy who was supersetting bench presses with pull-ups. Now, the bench press was at the bottom near the reception, and the pull-up bar was over on the other side. You had to climb some stairs and go over to the side. So it was a bit of a distance, and he was supersetting. Now, this guy was big, like big. He was about, I would say, 120 kilos, maybe 260 pounds, right? Not in the best of shape. So not a good looking 260. Big belly, but he had that big steroid look where he had huge traps and shoulders and just had a big red belly. And he was running back and forth doing the bench press and the pull-ups. And he didn't look good. Like, he looked exhausted. His face was just brutally red. Now, from what I know of the guy, what I was told afterwards, he was in his 50s, probably 55, 56, and he was on quite a lot of juice, and he was very heavy. That's not a good combination. And at the time, he was just maxing out on the bench for whatever sets of 5 and running over to the pull-up bar, doing pull-ups and coming back and just going back and forth. Now, on one trip to the pull-up bar, he fell. He had a heart attack right there. Died there on the spot. Dead pretty much by the time he hit the ground. Now, that's a tragedy. The next part is what we call the ambulance, obviously. Call the police, call the ambulance. The owner was worried, of course, because it's his property. Death on the property is going to get investigated. So call the police, call the ambulance. Police came first, and it was this young police officer. And she came up to us, and she looked very nervous. So she looked at the body. We had checked him because we checked his pulse, and he was gone. There was no coming back from that. He was just out. I mean, I suspect he was probably out before he even hit the ground. So he was done. He was away. So she said to us, "Can you help me?" She said, can you help me put him in the recovery position? We were like, recover from what, bro? Like, he's gone. There's no coming back from that. So she was kind of getting a bit panicked, and she was on a walkie-talkie on a phone, whatever it was, and calling for people to get there quickly. So we did. We ended up putting him in the recovery position, and he was dribbling from his mouth. He was just gone, like, so there was no recovery. But anyway, then the ambulance eventually came. They did confirm that he was gone, and he was probably gone before he hit the ground. That was that story. Okay, so next story is a little bit tragic, quite painful. I was at the same gym a few years later, and it was a winter's evening. So you know what it's like in those old gyms. The ventilation is not very good. There was no central heating, really. There was a central heating fan. But we all were there with multiple layers because we knew it was going to be cold, all just trying to work out, keeping the door closed because otherwise you get lots of condensation that comes in. And if you just looked around, everything was steamed up because all the lads were in there. We're all training hard, multiple layers. There was a lot of steam. So all the windows were all steamed up. There was just condensation everywhere. And it was one of those gyms which had old school equipment. So all the metal gyms were just wet to touch. So they're just full of condensation. Everything was wet. So there was a group of guys. One of them was doing calf raises on the leg press machine and just shouting, going for it. The whole, just a big, aggressive kind of gym atmosphere. And the gym owner was going around trying to wipe down the surfaces and make sure everyone was safe, because it was pretty dangerous. He sees this guy doing calf raises on the leg press, and he spots that there are no safeties on. He runs over, but he's too late. Before we know it, all I hear is screams, just screams upon screams upon screams. You guess what happened? His foot slipped. The leg press and all that weight just slammed down on his shins. It was brutal, absolutely brutal. So while he was screaming, the guys unloaded the leg press chassis and got him out. But that was horrible. Thankfully, he's made a full recovery. He's walking, but yeah, that was pretty horrific. The final story, okay. So back in the day, I used to lift with a crew of powerlifters. There was one time, there's a new guy that came and trained with us. He was one of my friend's friend kind of thing. So he trained with us, which was cool. We were all serious lifters. A friend of mine was at the same level as I was. Another guy who's very, very good. He's now on the national team. We were a bunch of very serious lifters, right? Now, this guy comes in, trains, and he wants to train just as hard as we are. Okay, fine. He's your friend. You deal with him kind of thing. I'm training. Let me get on with my business. So turns out he calls my friend the next day, and he's super sore. Obviously, he's just wrecked because we do the squat, bench, and deadlift all in one day. So he wakes up the next morning, and he feels like he's been run over by a truck. So my friend's laughing at him, thinking, hey, just relax. It's normal. Just have some good food, eat your protein. You're going to be fine. And he's like, no, I'm really worried. Maybe I should take some paracetamol or some ibuprofen. And my friend's like, look, you're kind of exaggerating. It's fine. Like, whatever you want to do, just go for it. And he's like, no, I'm going to take some ibuprofen. Like, okay, cool. So turns out, next thing we know, he's in hospital. He's a 34-year-old man, and he's never, ever taken ibuprofen before in his life. Turns out he takes it for the first time ever, and he's allergic. Has an allergic reaction, ends up in hospital, almost dies. So one night of lifting with our powerlifting crew almost killed him. There you go. Anyway, that is the final story. Hopefully you guys found that somewhat entertaining. That's a bit of my history, and I hope you got something out of it. So I'll see you in the next one for something a bit more informative. For now, peace out. Take care.